Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Veda Vaishnavi and I am a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, I extend a warm welcome to all to today's Wednesday seminar titled How China Sees the Iran War Beyond State Messaging. Today's seminar examines how the ongoing conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran is being interpreted within China beyond official diplomatic statements. The presentation explores narratives emerging from party state media, commercial commentary, and social media discourse, and analyzes how China's strategic and policy community is framing the war for both domestic and international audiences. In particular, the discussion highlights themes such as criticism of American and Israeli actions, doubts about the possibility of a quick victory over Iran, the broader geopolitical and economic implications of the war for China, and the lessons that China may draw for its future strategy under intensifying great power competition. The seminar also reflects on the tensions between China's professed support for multilateralism and the growing nationalist discourse around self-reliance, hard power, and social cohesion. The speakers for today's seminar are Mr. Raj Gupta and Ms. Shruti Jargad. Raj Gupta is a doctoral scholar at the Center for Chinese Studies in the School of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is currently a visiting fellow at the Harvard-Yenching Institute under the ICS HYI Multi-Year Doctoral Fellowship. He holds bachelor's degree and master's degree in Chinese language from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Later on, he pursued advanced Chinese language training with Beijing Language and Culture University. His research focuses on China's central bank digital currency. Ms. Shruti Jargad is a visiting fellow at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Canberra, and a non-resident research associate at the Centre of Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi. She holds double master's degrees in political science and China studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University and Peking University, respectively. She has also received Mandarin language training at National Taiwan Normal University. Her research interests include China's political economy and China-South Asia relations. Professor Alka Acharya, the chair for today's seminar, is currently the director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. She was previously professor and chairperson at the Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She also served as the editor of China Report. She was nominated by the Indian government as a member of the India-China Eminent Persons Group 2006 to 2008 and was a member of the National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India for 2 terms. Her current research focuses on India, China, Russia trilateral cooperation and comparing the Indian and Chinese strategies of regional engagement. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the session. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor Acharya. Thank you.
Thank you, Veda and Atman. And very good morning to Raj, but a very good evening to all those who have joined us. And I am particularly delighted to welcome you to today's discussion, which features two bright sparks that have been part of the ICS network. Raj continues to be, of course, associated with us. He is recipient of the Institute of Chinese Studies, Harvard-Yenching Institute multi-year fellowship. And he is currently in Harvard pursuing his doctoral research. Shruti is in and out of various things. She is, as she must, exploring, I think, a wide range of issues, ideas, pursuing unconventional kind of areas to look at. In short, she is currently at the generalist phase before I think she starts to zoom into her more specialized areas, which we all hope she will do very soon. Now, the ICS has as its USP the promotion of young scholars, which includes providing them a platform to disseminate budding ideas, exploring the new kind of areas they are looking at. Very often we have found that they provide very interesting fresh perspectives. And as you can see, today's talk goes beyond the state insofar as the current dominant issue of international relations, which is the US-Israel attack on Iran. Clearly, it would appear at one level, say that particularly for scholars, analysts of international relations, foreign policy, and arguably it would apply to both scholars in China and the rest of the world. It would appear that the US-China tussle, as it were, for taking the #1 spot in this power transition that we are witnessing. So it would appear that this is really the primary area of focus and concern. And therefore, statist narratives, statist perspectives, official positions, great strategic kind of plans and tactical kind of adjustments, all this really becomes one part of the things that are happening in front of us. But the other, which seems to, as I said, grab attention is how is this tussle taking place? So actually, the more riveting question becomes that is this what Chinese scholars have been calling for a long time, the great upheaval unseen in a century. Now, this is, of course, not to relegate the far graver issue of the impact of this war on the global economy, the looming global recession, national economies looking at inflationary spirals and so on. But for the most part, for us in the Institute of Chinese Studies, as well as those who are looking at that broader macro power struggle, what hangs in balance is how are these two players assessing each other, looking at each other. And within this, I think a very interesting segment is how are the Chinese positioning themselves. There is a huge amount of material. I will not even try to categorize that. But what our two presenters today are going to attempt is how do we understand what is happening outside the statist narrative? Are there a diversity of views, or are they mostly supporting what the official narrative is? Are there some perspectives which would give us an idea of the debates that are going on within China? I think these are issues that our presenters will help us navigate. We all remember, and I think this came to my mind recently once again, though I remember during the first Trump presidency, and in the end of his very first year, a bunch of Chinese academics wrote to President Trump. Of course, it was a very tongue-in-cheek and a very sarcastic letter, but they wrote a letter of thanks to him, saying that you are doing us a great favor by driving away your traditional allies, and thank you for showing, this is the interesting part, thank you for showing the world that China is more trustworthy and stable. Now, mind you, this is a bunch of Chinese academics and scholars. And they went on to say, thank you for putting economic pressure on China and pushing us to innovate. And thank you most of all for illustrating that America is in its imperial twilight, a decaying and hypocritical power. So this is one perspective that came out of the academic world during the first Trump presidency, but we see a lot of echoes of these themes in the current kind of responses that come out of China and the ones that we have an opportunity to read. So I would therefore be very interested in listening to both Raj and Shruti as to how they assess these. Are there similar kind of themes? Are there newer themes? what are the concerns, and to what extent I think we can see them as different or distinct from the official discourse. But that is really something that we would really look forward to understanding and grappling with. So with that, I will ask Shruti to go first. You've got 20 minutes, and I shall let you know at 15 that you have to wind up. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll just share my screen. Is it visible to everyone, the presentation?
Yes, I can see it, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much to Professor Acharya for giving us this opportunity, and to ICS interns Veda and Atman for helping organize this session today. And so this presentation is based on an issue brief that Raj and I recently wrote and was published at Shivnada University's Center of Excellence for Himalayan Studies. And what we are presenting today is the key arguments, key findings that we have in our project. And what we'll do is that we'll divide the content between Raj and myself, where I'll introduce the topic, our methodology, and introduce you to two of the four themes we find out. Raj will then carry on the presentation with the other two themes, the conclusions, and what Professor Acharya mentioned is the most interesting part, where the non-state or other media, narratives in other media differ from the official diplomatic stance. All right, so okay. What are the key questions that we are handling? The first thing is that there is a diplomatic stance which is conveyed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but there is also a need to look beyond that stance. And the reason that we need to do that is that the language that is used by the official diplomatic cohort is very formulaic, and it is often restrained, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The second thing is that while it shows us how China is conveying the war externally or conveying any situation externally, it does not give us enough insight into how a particular external situation is being communicated to internal audiences, domestic audiences, and which makes referring to other sources of narratives and media, for instance, traditional media, social media, particularly relevant. And the third thing that this exercise does is give us, as again Professor Acharya mentioned, a differentiation in how different groups of people are responding. Academics are responding in a certain language, newspaper analysts and commentators are responding in a certain way, and the social media users are responding in a certain way, and there is difference in maybe the degree of some views might be extreme, some views might be more nuanced. And so we find that referring to a different group of sources, data sources, helps us answer these four questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Which is, what is China's diplomatic stance on this war? So the first thing that we refer to as almost a control group here is, what is the official stance? Then we find out how are strategic analysts looking at the situation. The third question that we go ahead with is, how is the conflict being portrayed to domestic audiences? And then what are the various narratives? So when we say narratives, we find multiple narratives, which we have divided into four major themes. Okay, now before we come to the actual paper, the question arises, what is China's role in this war? As we see, the key actors are US, Israel, and Iran. And so here we find that China has high stakes in the war. It is not only a major importer of oil from Iran, but it's a major part of its trade also flows through the Strait of Hormuz. It also has diplomatic stakes in the region. It has been involved in the mediation or negotiating between between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It also has relations with other countries in the Gulf. And third thing is that it also has a strategic role wherein it is in a long-term partnership with the long-term strategic cooperation ties with Iran. So even if it is not a direct party to the war, it is an indirect party in that sense. Furthermore, what is often being pointed out in the current media reports is how China is actively assisting Iran. This could be in the way of developing its armed developing its armed forces or supplying crucial chemicals. And so all of this is being implicates China in this particular situation. Now, coming back to our paper here, our methodology, we refer to Chinese language editorials and commentaries with high readership. So when I say high readership, it implies that these particular articles had a viewership of more than 100,000. We also referred to social media hashtags, which ran into hundreds, and all of these were collected between the period of March 1 to 17. So the presentation that you see today is going to be focused, at least in themes that dominated during that period. But we will be adding updates based on the current situation during this presentation. There were 5 major sources of data. The first is official statements, that is the spokesperson's remarks on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, party state media, which includes People's Daily, Global Times, Xinhua, Cover News, etc. Non-state media, here we majorly refer to posts on Guancha because we found it to be the most popularly used website. Think China was other English publication that we refer to in order to find articles by prominent Chinese think tankers. Social media, we refer to Weibo hashtags and posts, and for self media, we refer to WeChat public accounts. Now, the important thing is that each of these are beyond the official statements, almost influential, most influential sources. People's Daily, if something is printed in a People's Daily editorial, that is akin to the stance of the party state. On self media, we are referring to in people who are in influential positions or have a high follower count, which is what makes these posts important. All right, so the diplomatic stance now. China's official response came in as soon as the attack happened. And the key considerations or the key points here are that first, there has been a condemnation of both killing of a top leader as well as unilateral attacks. Secondly, even though China, I mean, there have been reports that China is providing military support, but what we find is that in the diplomatic statements, there is a strong diplomatic support from China and denial, active denial of any kind of military assistance. The third thing that we find is that China has actively proposed itself as the mediator. Now, this mediation comes not as an individual actor, but often in cooperation with other actors. So, for instance, in this case, Pakistan. Even if China is proposing activity in the UNSC, it is done in coordination with Russia. So, we find this maybe a newer kind of mediation because the past activities that we have seen of mediation are China going out on its own. So it's interesting to see how China is playing itself as almost a team player and on a consensus-based approach. Then the two major actions that we have seen from China's diplomatic response are first, the 5-point mediation plan. And the second thing is that Xi Jinping has come up with his own 4 ideas, which we can go into detail in the Q&A. All right. So if this is the diplomatic stance, now what is going on social media? So as I said, we had looked at social media hashtags with the highest number of views. And you can see that these are almost all of them are quite emotive. And Iranian missile penetrates Israeli defense system is one example, overt assassination. And so all of these themes, how we combined them in our analysis was that we looked at the articles that were associated with these hashtags and picked out the themes combining them with what we found in the state media. But a sample of all of these hashtags can be found in the paper for those who are interested. Okay, now we find out 4 major themes, and each of these themes have multiple narratives within them. And these 4 themes are the US hegemony. Secondly, disputing any ideas of quick victory. Third, what geopolitical implications are for China. And even though, again, China is not an active party to the war, there are geopolitical implications that analysts are seeing for China. And fourth thing is, what lessons are being derived from this war for the future of China-US relations. I will go over the first and the second theme, and then Raj will take over with the third and fourth. All right. So the first theme that we found out is similar to what was being said in the official narratives, where what US has done is being called a law of the jungle and breakdown of UN-based global order. This is one of the most prominent themes in party state media. And in fact, academics are going as far as to say that the rules-based order is dead and it needs to be replaced, and it has been replaced by a fear-based order, as you see Professor Jung Yong-Nian's remark here. Now, in this law of the jungle, we also find that scholars are pointing out to different reasons as to why US attacked Iran. First, one of the reasons is predatory hegemony. So US is seen as a power in decline. Again, what Professor Acharya mentioned about the first Trump administration, we find a very similar assessment that US is a power in decline and it is clutching on to whatever means possible to stay in power. And so therefore, it is seen as a reactive response from a declining superpower. The other thing that they're talking about is that it is not about security at all. It is about gaining control over these resources. Another trend is calling it a strategic deception. So what US has done is being seen in a longue durée. They're saying that this is not something that is an isolated incident, rather something that US has repeatedly done, which is using negotiations as a smokescreen for aggression. At the end of the day, it has been assessed that the end goal is to attack militarily. And the third thing is taking almost a non-US centered perspective, where they're saying that this is an Iran-Israel regional war, and the US has been drawn into this war beyond, despite whether it was willing or not. It has tied itself to Israel's chariot, and so making it about the region and US as almost a powerless supplier of arms. Now, that being the first theme, we also find out that there is an aspect of ideology that is brought up, and again, which combines with the first, with the diplomatic stance. And here, what these Iran war is being called almost a color revolution, where the idea is regime change. And we'll later see how the Chinese scholars themselves or Chinese analysts are themselves saying that this is not a legitimate way of doing things, and it will not work. All right. Then another important point here, which I can describe later, is that the Chinese are portraying themselves again as a team player and a consensus-based actor. So they talk about a unified opposition to this law of the jungle, bringing in examples of China working with Russia, China working with Gulf countries, and China working with Pakistan. All right. Then the second theme here is that there is expectation that it's not going to be a quick victory for the US. And in this, there are 3 major factors that different analysts are citing. One is political resilience and social cohesion in Iran. On the one hand, there is strong condemnation of the killing of the top leader, but at the same time, Chinese analysts point out that the reason for Iran's resilience is because the system is not dependent on a particular leader, but it is the institutions. And these institutions include dual track institutionalized theocracy or an independent chain of command. They're also saying that killing the top leader has created a rally around the flag effect, wherein people are responding emotionally in favor of the regime instead of coming out in protest. And they contrast this with what happened in the US in the immediate aftermath of the attack, where the allies are opposing US, or its own population is opposing. And this point is important because we'll circle back to it at the end as to how China sees its own future. The second thing that they point out is the nature of war. So, a lot of articles go into particular details about what kind of weapons Iran possesses and how this is used. This can be used to counter US's multi-million dollar missiles. The second thing they point out is that because of the sanctions that the US placed, Iran has the most domesticated weapon system in the region. And they're also leveraging their geography, and these production facilities are deep underground. They also point out that US and Israel will need to send boots on the ground because if it goes on long enough, they'll be stuck in a quagmire, which will only enhance the domestic opposition that they're facing. So the second reason for this not being a quick victory, which I think has played out well, is the asymmetric warfare. And then the third reason that they point out is the geostrategic significance of the Strait of Hormuz, which is home to all of the which allows for global trade and the flow of oil, trade of energy supplies. And one of the key points here is there is an appreciation of Iran's resilience and criticism for the blockade, or criticism for ships not passing through, or a stop on trade is not laid on Iran. There is an implicit appreciation of Iran for using all tactics to counter the US. And in the official statements, as well as in the media analysis, the blame is squarely put on US military attack. And the second point that is highlighted here is self-reliance. Just like Iran is self-reliant for its own resources, weaponry, etc., they show how China is also in a position of strength because of its energy reserves, industrial system, diversified imports. And this is countered to other countries, including India, Japan, and South Korea, whose energy vulnerabilities have been exposed by the US-Iran conflict. Now, the key point here, I would again highlight, is that the focus on system and systemic strength, a system that does not collapse after the death or killing of its top leader. And the second point being appreciation for self-reliance. All right. I don't know how much time I have, but I will let Raj come in now and carry forward the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Shruti. You had about a little over 4 minutes, but who do we have for discussion? That's okay. Yes, Raj, go ahead now.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Shruti. First of all, I would like to extend my deep gratitude to ICS because apart from this opportunity to present our work, the Institute has also given me a lot of support and guidance and continues to do so in my PhD journey through the ICS HYI Fellowship. So thanks to the ICS and to the Director, Professor Acharya. And also thank you, ma'am, for your insightful opening remarks. And also thanks to the ICS interns, Veda and Atman, for helping us with the logistics of the meeting. So picking up from where Shruti left, she just outlined the two out of the four major themes that we have identified that are prominent in how China sees the US-Israel war on Iran. Now, the third major theme is the larger geopolitical implications for China. So, the Chinese media and commentaries have drawn implications for broader US-China competition, and they highlight China's advantageous position and its role as a stabilizer in the global disorder. So the US actions are seen as something that will turn out to be ultimately advantageous for China, as these actions will accelerate the marginalization of the US in the Middle East and exacerbate the alienation of its allies and partners. Hence, this would create an opportunity for China to enhance its influence in the region and in the world. So under this theme, the first point, as listed in the slide, is that it is widely argued that this war and the attacks on US allies in the Middle East have exposed the fallibility of the US security umbrella and also weakened its reliability. So one of the strongest statements that we came across in our analysis was of Professor Jinsan Rong in one of his articles. While talking about any future conflicts, he argues that China is not afraid of the US, and because China is really strong now, and if and I quote, if we really clash head on, we will win. So in his assessment, this confidence comes from China's great improvement in China's comprehensive national strength and military power. Second, on the geo-economic front, experts highlight the destabilization of the political and financial foundations of the petrodollar system. Along the same lines, an economist, Lei Qian, argues that the financial structure of global integration will definitely be broken down, but he highlights that China has the capacity to withstand this. And due to its efforts at internationalization of RMB and digital RMB and the safety net that China has built in the last 10 years. So whether it is in terms of energy, food, or finance. Third, the commentators argued that while the US faces opposition, uh, we will be on the same slide. Yes, on the third theme. Yes, thank you, Shruti. So third, the commentators argue that while the US faces opposition from its allies and its own population, China, on the other hand, will be stabilizing force for the global South. And we saw that in one of the Global Times editorial, it noted that basically pointing towards the US, that unlike the US, where decision making is inefficient and there are internal divisions and foreign policies frequently swing back and forth, China is able to mobilize nationwide consensus and strength to advance shared goals in a coordinated way. Similarly, on Weibo, a People's Daily online commentary proclaimed that while other countries make arbitrary decisions or withdraw from international agreements, China positions itself as a responsible major power. And amid escalating conflict in the Middle East, which adds a new layer of geopolitical uncertainty, China is advocating for dialogue and negotiation to resolve differences. So the Chinese analysts display confidence in the country's capacity to withstand the fallout of the war while also taking advantage of the weakened position of the US in the region and globally. So in a now familiar pattern, China also portrays itself as a responsible power and a stabilizing force in the global order disrupted by the US unilateralism. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So, with the backdrop of the current conflict, several commentators have discussed what China should do for future hedging. Now, for instance, former Xinhua editor Yu Yuan observes that China's initial refusal to immediately condemn these strikes reflects a strategic choice to quietly await changes and avoid getting overly entangled. So, this cautious wait and see approach is intended to preserve China's flexibility. You suggest that premature strong support for the current Iranian leadership would have made it difficult for Beijing to deal with the new authorities in case the conflict was to result in a regime change. Similarly, Chinsan Rong suggests that China's active involvement should be a matter of timing. China should not wait until China should wait until all parties have exhausted their ammunition and possess a genuine will for dialogue before stepping in to carry out mediation. In the commentaries and articles analyzed, much focus has been placed on implications for China's future strategy as its competition with the US intensifies. Chin Sanrong contends that the relatively relaxed and comfortable international environment of the past is now disappearing. He suggests that China must change its way of looking at the world, and its approach to dealing with it should also change because the world is increasingly getting dominated by raw power politics. So, Professor Chin Rong aligns with the Chinese official view that might does not equal right, but at the same time, he asserts that China's most effective role is to desperately develop its own strength to ensure that it has the necessary vigor for global contestation. On the other hand, other experts such as Chang Yung Nian calls for a new philosophy of non-interventionism 2.0 or a positive intervention strategy wherever China's overseas interests are affected or overseas factors have the potential to affect China's internal interests. So, in an interview given to Xinjiang Pao Pinglun, he warns that China must prevent regional neighbors like Japan and Philippines from becoming the Israels of East Asia. That is, proxies used by the US to maintain regional dominance. So, with this understanding, it is argued that while restraining from outright confrontation, China must deal with the US from a position of strength, which will come from building a collective mindset and solving internal contradictions in China and enhancing both hard and soft power, which includes which includes basically military strength, industrial and technological self-reliance, and supply chain security, and also expanding diplomatic outreach. Uh, Wang Zhejuang, from BLCU, Beijing Language and Culture University, he argues that the forms of confrontation will likely become increasingly diversified and asymmetric. In addition to conventional military clashes, cyber attacks, proxy wars, and political and media campaigns and diplomatic contestation in international forums may all become enduring features, is what Wang Zhejuang believes. So there's also an opinion that AI should be used to strengthen China's national defense and enhance its hard power. Because experts believe that the US leverages AI and its tech sector for military operations, and China must also rethink its own technological development path. And if China does not use its AI for military purposes, it will eventually find itself at a disadvantage. So the ultimate message distilled for the Chinese audience is of necessity of self-reliance in the face of the breakdown of a rules-based world order. So, by framing the Iran conflict as a lesson in the cold logic of superior firepower, party state backed actors on Chinese social media, they reinforce the necessity of building a cohesive social system and a powerful autonomous military industrial complex to survive a world without rules. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, in analyzing all of these narratives, we have found that there are incongruities in the narratives. As Professor Acharya mentioned in the opening remarks, that whether there are differences in the official stance and what the other experts are saying across different platforms. So we have found that there are definitely nuanced undertones of differences, or there are tensions between the narratives. So based on the thematic analysis, the incongruities that we found were, on the one hand, MOFA statements as well as state media editorials. They call for a joint opposition to US unilateralism and hegemonism, indicating preference for a multipolar world order and adherence to UN principles. But on the other hand, analysis of media content reveals a more nuanced or complicated picture where China, while engaging with multilateral and international institutions, is calling for reconstruction of the order without really specifying what this reconstruction would look like. So, second, while calling for the rule of international law, Chinese analysts simultaneously use Iran's example to take the view of raw power politics and argue that rogue United States can only be dealt with from a position of national strength. Finally, alongside military and institutional strength, Chinese analysts attribute Iran's resilience to a social cohesion, even as Iranian supporters from the US-Israel strikes are dismissed as brainwashed. Notably, we have seen that in the commentaries analyzed above, there is hardly any mention or acknowledgement of the anti-regime protests in Iran, which were suppressed. On the other hand, analysts highlight the domestic opposition facing the US leadership and its resultant policy fluctuation as a weakness. So, state media commentary contrasts this with the robustness of the Chinese governance system in how well it mobilizes domestic consensus and maintains policy continuity. Can we move to the next slide, please? So as early as in a 2012 assessment, Wang Qi, an influential IR scholar at Peking University, noted that US actions and policies in Iran were seen as based on injustice and narrow American self-interest, with a direct and indirect impact on China's interest. So he had characterized the US as the greatest national security threat for China. Now, based on many such assessments, China in the last decade has been building its strategic reserve capacity of essential commodities and diversifying supply chains. We find that media commentary on this issue tends towards nationalist and even sensationalist perspectives. For instance, China's military preparedness against the US is repeatedly alluded to. The example that I gave of the statement of Professor Jin Rong, in which he claimed that if China and US clashes head on, China will win. So we see that China's military preparedness is alluded to, but despite the ongoing upheavals and corruption scandals in the PLA. Similarly, economic strength is highlighted without considering structural problems like debt and aging population. So this examination of media narratives on the war in Iran gives us important clues on China's strategic outlook, as well as the party state's messaging on external issues to its own population. To conclude, when we read Chinese commentary on this war, we see two things happening side by side. On one hand, there is a sharp criticism of the US. On the other hand, there is also a quiet message for the Chinese people themselves. And the message is that we must build our own strength. So criticism of criticism of the US travels along with this quiet buildup of the self. This is the heart of what we have observed in our study. The second point is equally important. Beijing is using an outside crisis to teach a lesson at home that the war is happening in the Middle East, but the real lesson is for China. They are saying that basically look at the world that we are living in, look at what is happening to Iran, and we must prepare ourselves. So an external event becomes an external event becomes a domestic lesson on the strategic environment. Now, in this whole story, China presents itself in a careful manner. They show themselves as restrained, they show themselves as responsible, and they even suggest that they can play the role of a mediator. At the same time, they describe the United States as a destabilizing power, as a country that is breaking the rules. But behind this picture, what are the commentators really telling China to do? They are prioritizing four things. Or basically, they're pointing to four things. First is self-reliance, that China must depend on itself in technology, in supply chains, and in finance. And second is the logic of hard power, that military strength and use of AI for defense and building real capability is what is going to help China. And the third is a lesson in social cohesion, that the country must stay united from inside. And the fourth is a readiness, that we must be ready for a conflictual world order and a world with fewer rules. That is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Raj. I think you both were so apprehensive about keeping to time that you actually took less than what we had allotted for you. But before we open it up for general discussion, as I said, that I would like to really just query you on a couple of things. My original thought was to ask you both a separate question. But there is a lot of overlap in both your presentations, although you have focused on two themes each. But there's one question which, or rather, two issues that come to my mind, and maybe you can each address it from your own perspectives in terms of the way you have sought to focus this presentation. So the first thing is that while you have obviously cited the names of Chen Sang-gun, for instance, or Wang Jise, who are very well-known names, the themes that you have raised are generally what we are accustomed to reading. I mean, if you look at scholars like Tawei, for instance, or Senior Colonel Chopo, who's writing a lot there, and a few others who are very well known in terms of the positions they're taking, and mostly they encapsulate what you are saying. It would appear that you have focused on essentially Beijing, Shanghai. But is there any other geographic kind of element here that do you have in your ambit writings or perspectives from some other parts of China which can show you some difference or some kind of nuance? Because Beijing and Shanghai would really, in many ways, bring the focus on the issues that you have mentioned. So one is whether you can give me a sense of this geographic range. The second issue really here is that when I see the issues that you have made, those four kind of sections in which you are looking at the views, it would appear that by and large, they are operating within the official statist perspective. Some different nuances come up here and there, but they really don't go out of what I would essentially call a nationalist and their role as an emerging player. Okay. But these are really the two bookends. So would you say that this would essentially be a reflection of elite thinking? Do we have, so are you looking at academics and media personalities largely? And when you refer to social media, are there any voices among the people, among the general, let's say, engaged, educated Chinese who are either endorsing or saying anything contrary? In other words, anything different from what you have presented here, which would give a sense of the feel of the ground, as it were. So you both can take it up, pick up both of these aspects, which are, in one sense, interlinked. So you can go first, Raj, if you wish.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the comments and the questions. So, about your first question, that whether we have looked at other regions apart from Beijing and Shanghai. So, while we were doing the study, our focus was to get the prominent themes across various platforms, and in which we tried to get basically uh, the prominent narratives that are present in the social media through hashtags, and then the articles that get the highest readership. So in with those filters on, or with those conditions, the resultant analysis, or the resultant narratives that we get were mostly coming from Beijing and Shanghai. So that is why most of the analysts that we have looked at, or most of the experts that we have looked at, they come from Beijing and Shanghai. And but yes, I think it would be very interesting to see experts from other regions as well. And I think we would definitely include them in our in the next time when we are looking at issues like this. So, and the second question, that whether in the social media, where if there is something different from the official narrative. I think the official narrative is, especially given by the in the statements given by the leaders and the MOFA statements, they are still very restrained and obviously diplomatic. But when we come to the social media narratives on what hashtags are run, and so in on Weibo, there is this system of hosting hashtags, and the state media is allotted hashtags whenever and a big event takes place. For example, the US Israel war on Iran. So a certain hashtag that the Iranian missiles penetrate, let's say, UAE. So this sentence as a hashtag is hosted by state media. So these important hashtags are allotted to state media, and then they control the narrative as to what are the posts that will be posted in the social media. And they have the power to either basically delete any thing that they don't see fitting their narrative, or something that is different from the narrative. So yeah, so coming back to the point, so the official statements are very restrained, and but posts on social media, especially by scholars, they are not that restrained, as the examples that I gave, in which they say that China's national comprehensive strength and military strength has grown a lot, and it will easily. So if US and China were to clash head on, China is going to win. So these kinds of statements we don't really see coming out of the official narratives, but we do see them coming from the experts. So and then yeah, so that would be it. Maybe Shruti can
Um,
add.
yes, I mean, I must say that all of the questions that you have raised, we discussed these multiple times as the caveats that we should offer, as to and the controls that we thought could be applicable here was, we were looking at what is it that is being conveyed to the domestic Chinese population. And by looking at hashtags which have 240 million view, again, we can't tell what is the region that people are looking at, people looking at these hashtags are based in. But we assume that this has a wide enough reach in terms of the messaging or in terms of their popularity. Same thing goes for the arguments about the readership of the articles that we referred to. Intentionally, we did read the articles that were that had a lesser number of views. Um, But because the other articles had higher number of views, some had 30,000, but others had over a lakh. And that difference shows that some kind of views were gaining more traction within the readership itself. And that again, we took as a signal that this is the more dominant perspective that is being conveyed. What we could have done is to look at publications from each of different regions, which again, with our limited time and resources, we did not do. But I hope that we can take it up in the future where we compare different perspectives from different regions, coming from different institutions also. So yeah, that's something that we'll definitely look up in the future. The other thing that I would want to highlight here is the difference between, as Raj mentioned, that the official statements don't give us a lot. They tell us repeatedly. We read each and every day from 28th February till today. I read statements by all three spokespersons, and it's the same points repeated over and over again. What these analysts have done is give meaning to the statements that these official spokespersons are making. And so none of the official spokespersons till, I think, early April mentioned that there is a need for a new order. They're talking, they're basically talking about upholding the UN based global order. Whereas from these analysts, we are already finding out that they're talking about reconstruction. And then in early April, we hear from President Xi Jinping, the four ideas that I mentioned. And here he starts mentioning, I can read out the 4 points here, where he's talking about adhere to principle of peaceful coexistence, which is again standard. And then creating a comprehensive and cooperative and sustainable architecture in the security architecture in the Middle East. Now, such a security architecture already exists, which is the US-based architecture. And so from the media statements, we find out that they're saying that there is repeatedly saying that this architecture is breaking down. And then from the official statements at a later point, we find out, okay, now President Xi Jinping himself is saying that there is an architecture needed in the Middle East, which is based on the principles of sovereignty. So basically saying that, okay, US has to be out. Now, if we had merely relied on the official statements, I don't think one would reach to this conclusion. So all I'm trying to say here is that they offer a valuable perspective to us. There is definitely a need to be more, have a wider reach. And one of the other attempts that we did was just to read the comments of the people on these posts and hashtags, which turned out to be a fun exercise because they had views and opinions about everything. India was mentioned several times in those posts, and many other countries were mentioned, and not in the gentlest of words. Um, yeah, it would be a much bigger academic exercise and a much interesting exercise, a very interesting exercise to undertake. All right, thank you. I'll stop.
All right. Thanks, both of you, for those responses. I think the sheer diversity of views that have come up, I mean, that by itself, I think, is a very, very interesting shift in the way in which the PRC, not just the state, but the people are beginning to, speak up, have a voice, make a kind of a statement about how they are thinking about the affairs of the world today. And you were mentioning this point about the rule-based order and the UN system, and how the Chinese have obviously always stressed the significance. I just saw this comment by Marco Rubio on Twitter or X this afternoon, where he's saying that he's calling upon the United Nations to bring all people together to stop this. And he's saying if the UN cannot stop this kind of mindless kind of thing that Iran is doing by shutting off Hormuz, then he says, I don't know what the UN is for, which is, I thought, a very rich statement coming from Rubio. But certainly now the possible benefits of a rule-based order are beginning to come home in a very different way. But anyway, let's stop here for the moment and open up the floor. We have about half an hour. So maybe, Veda, you could take us through the questions, comments.
Yes, ma'am. So the first question that's in our chat box is from Ramakrishna, who asks, to what extent do internal domestic debates within China, including social media discourse, media commentary, and intellectual discussions, provide a more accurate understanding of Chinese state behavior than official government statements and diplomatic rhetoric? Researchers often face a problem when studying China, understanding the variation between what China says and what China does.
So is this addressed to anybody or just put out there?
No, they didn't specify.
Yes, you both just have to take a call as to who would like to answer these responses.
Maybe I can start
Yeah.
and then Shruti can add on.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ramakrishna, for this question. I think on what the question is about, on what is more reliable to understand Chinese state actions, whether it's the social media discourse, media commentary, or the official stance. So I think obviously it's a mix of all of these things, and how the question also frames that there's a difference between what China says and what China does. So that perhaps will always be there till some extent, as we have seen that uh, the Chinese official responses, the MOFA responses, they say that they categorically reject that they have provided any military assistance to Iran, but yet we see reports of some sort of military assistance being provided to Iran in one form or the other. So exactly, yes, there is a difference, but what these commentaries or social media discourse or more detailed analysis of experts does is it helps us to understand that why China is behaving in a certain way, apart from it can help us to understand what China might do in the future and what will guide its actions if we understand those nuances that are given by the experts today. So I think that is why it is important to see it from all of these perspectives, or all of these angles, and using all of these sources. Yeah.
Just a small thing to add on. There is, of course, going to be variation, and therefore, a different group of researchers follow up on different data sources, wherein some are following purely action, and they have pointed out to the military aid, and even before the war, how the Chinese companies were providing surveillance architecture to Iranian regime. So that difference is always going to be there. But I think what narratives help us do, and again, similar to what Raj mentioned, is frame these actions in a particular way. If the Chinese government is repeatedly in both its state media as well as in an official stance saying that security and development go hand in hand, and developing economic relations with a particular country, that is giving us a signal that what is the future of this economic relationship? Will it merely remain, even if it's not going to happen, it at least is foretelling what could possibly happen. So I think actions always have to be seen in particular narrative frameworks, and reading official media as well as other sources of media gives us important clues. Yeah, that's my response. Thank you, Ramakrishna, for that question.
Our second question is from Rafael Mariato, and they ask, how do you look at China's technical support? For example, the use of Baidu and other support systems. How do you look at the economic policies? China's relationship with other major players like Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries. Would you come to have any perspective on the Shia-Sunni divide?
Right, I can take this first. So again, we find multiple examples, not in these commentaries, but for the other research that we did for this article, that there is technical support that China is, that reports say China is providing. In terms of, I, I, I I cannot list them out here, but would be happy to carry on this discussion with some links once I'm done answering. But The second thing is China's relationship with major players. So both the official media and in other forms, official statements and other media, there is a strong emphasis on China's shuttle diplomacy, where China is able to work both with all kinds of actors in the region in order to bring them to a common ground. So we did not come across perspective on Shia Sunni divide, but at one point there was an article that referred to how Saudi Arabia, even while Saudi Arabia was implicitly goading the US into this in this war. Now, this is interesting because on the one hand, you are saying that there is China brokered peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and on the other hand, you are saying that Saudi Arabia was the one goading. So, highlighting this point would make China's mediation capacity seem weak. But that's the only thing that we saw in terms of this Saudi Arabia-Iran divide. But mostly China mentions, I mean, Chinese media analysts as well as official statements, they mention the GCC countries. They mention how their sovereignty has to be protected. They also mention how Iran's actions is going to harm relations with these countries. And at all times, taking both Iran and GCC and other Gulf countries together. Yeah, thank you.
I'll just add a small point on the Shia Sunni aspect of whether it came out, whether it was there in the analysis that we did. So I think one of the places where I found emphasis on the Shia Sunni aspect was when the Chinese experts were talking about Pakistan's role in mediation, and they were listing out what are the reasons why Pakistan is playing an important role in the mediation, or an active role in the mediation. They listed out many reasons, starting from how Pakistan is directly affected by this conflict because so much of it has energy reliance, and the fact that it has a huge amount of remittances coming from the Gulf region. So the any conflict in that region will be an issue for Pakistan, and the GCC region employs a lot of Pakistanis there, and if such conflict lasts, so they would be coming back to Pakistan, and it would be a problem for them. Along those same lines, there was this another factor which said that around 20% of Pakistani population is Shia. So any conflict in their bordering country will have spillover effects in Pakistan as well. And especially it mentioned that Balochistan will also have spillover effects if there is intensified conflict going on in Iran because of the border. So yeah, thank you for the question.
I think we'll have to, Pratik has a comment, and then we have one question by Kumar and then Abhinand. So, yeah,
Thank
Pratik, go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you to both the speakers for such a wonderful discussion. I just wanted to highlight two aspects. You see, before the war, there was a widespread belief in China that a stable modus vivendi with United States is possible because China believed that through the use of rare earths and counter tariffs, it had managed to pacify Trump. But during these 2 months, the kind of comments and statements and the general approach towards the Iran war, I think that consensus in China is now being reviewed. To the extent that they are questioning what does a good relationship with Trump actually even mean. That's why, for the first time this week, they issued a blocking order against American sanctions to buy Iranian oil. This is unprecedented and systematic and will have widespread ramifications. So, we'll have to see how the summit plays out because it will not be as smooth sailing as it was expected before the war. Second, I think that the Chinese are massively impressed by Iran's own success, that it managed to not only endure the attack but turned the tables on the United States in just 32 days and re-established control over the Hormuz. Iran also uh, has been quite impressed by the general Chinese support and diplomatic cover throughout the 2 months. 2 months, to the extent that IRGC now argues that we were dragging our feet with China, and now it's time to really go for a more substantial alliance. On the whole, I found the discussion to be very incisive, and I just wanted to highlight these two aspects. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shruti. Except that, again, we go back into the statist framework with your comments. But if our speakers have anything which they seem to recall touching on these issues, particularly the general positive way in which they have assessed how Iran has battled the US, was there also reflected? And yeah, you had a point where you did mention. Oh, yes, go ahead, please.
No, ma'am, I just have a small comment to add to Prateek's comment that he mentioned that there was a blocking order on American sanctions on Iranian oil. I think he's referring to the what is being called as the document number 21, I think, by MOFCOM that was published a few days ago. So, but the thing is, China has been, if we go by so many reports that are out there, China has been buying Iranian oil despite the sanctions and using what is called as teapot refineries, which are small refineries. They are called teapot refineries because of the small scale in which they operate, and these are mostly based in Shantung. So they have already been buying Iranian oil, and it is out there. There are many reports mentioning how these Shantung teapot refineries process these oil, and what they do is they act as a buffer whenever there is a scarcity of energy. They use these teapot refineries. But yes, I think the American sanctions on the blocking order by of MOFCOM on the American sanctions on Iranian oil will give will basically give more teeth in terms of any entity inside China not following the blocking order, and perhaps this because this blocking order is issued by MOFCOM, it can be used to take action against any entity that is not following the blocking order. So yeah.
Right. I just have a small point to add here. Yes, Prateek, we highlighted, I think, some of the points that you're saying. And when it comes to China buying Iranian oil, even in the official statements, they are calling US's sanctions as illegal unilateral sanctions, which hold no power or which hold no value in China's purchase of oil or China's relations with Iran. So what I find particularly interesting is that everywhere there is the use of this language of rights and legality in dismissing US's actions and justifying China's actions. So yeah, but thank you for your comment.
We have Abhinav Kumar who would like to say something.
Uh, Good
Is
evening,
it
everyone.
Virendra Kumar's question before we come to Abhinav, or is
Of course.
Uh,
So,
good, e-
Virendra,
good. e-
just a second, Abhinav? We'll first read out Virendra Kumar and then we'll come to you.
is
Sure, ma'am.
China's
Sure.
focus on becoming financial superpower rather military dominant has disappointed domestic audience in its unclear stand as a leader's role in global order? This question is from Virendra Kumar.
Right, I can take this one. So we are not certain about what the domestic audience's response to these narratives are. We don't have a systematic assessment of that. But what I can tell here is that it's not a rather situation. There is a simultaneous focus on military capacity as well as building all other kinds of capacity, including China's internationalization of the RMB, developing its digital currency. It mentions that how that all of these are cumulatively a source of strength. So yeah, I don't think that there is this categorization as, or at least we don't come across this categorization as one being more important than the other. They're rather part of the same strengthening. Thank you.
In fact, if you look at what Jin Sang-gung had to say, he's muscle flexing like very categorically, and he's saying that if we have to fight the US, we can.
And sorry, ma'am, I would just like to add a caveat here. When they said we would like to fight the US, that was very much made in the context of Taiwan. It and
true enough.
yeah.
True enough. But the point is not that they're going to obviously that the context and everything would differ, but the point is that they are asserting a certain kind of capability.
Mhm.
And I think in the Chinese discourse in general, you don't see this categorization between financial and military. It's a comprehensive national power. That is really the framework within which the Chinese discourse has taken place. And that comprehensive national power has at least 6 or 7 dimensions. Okay, let's go to Abhinav. And I think Noel also wants to comment after that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Raj and Shruti, for your wonderful presentation. And I would also like to thank Usha ma'am. Yesterday, she shared this meeting with us. Uh, uh, I want to ask one question and respond to my observation to Alka ma'am's second question, that how Chinese in different part they look this conflict differently. So to Raj and Shruti, I want to ask that I have noticed that you constantly use the term Iran war throughout your presentation. But what I have come across in the mainstream academic that and official discourse broadly, that they have adopted that the US-Israel war on Iran rather than Israel war. So could you please clarify on that bit? And on the second question, ma'am, you have asked that uh, this other part, apart from the Beijing and the Shanghai. So recently, I went to Chongqing, and I interacted with few teachers there. So the first teacher asked me that what happened during this war or the conflict, that the perception about US within the common people, that the shift when they look up US as an ally during the Tang period. Now they see US as a paper tiger, and their attitude towards US is just like the reversal of the Mao period era. And other interesting fact, or the my observation was that to address this war or conflict, they have started another approach, that is the traditional Chinese philosophy, and which says that weapons, which is a very prominent factor in this war, the weapons is just for tool, and the warfare should be very the person should be very cautious about while engaging in war. So this Chinese philosophy is very wide and well accepted among the Chinese people. And the third point I would like to mention that since it's a social media, every Chinese is engaged in social media platforms like Xiaohongshu and WeChat public account. So now we can, uh, as I discovered that just similar to in the Indian society, we have the Panch Tantra, and we have animals, so uh, they have voice, they have the different narrative stories, but instead in Chinese social media there are animals representing the current geopolitical scenario, like panda being harmonious, tiger being the stick master, and the octopus being Israel, and US being eagle. So it's also interesting to note that, so how the Chinese common people are observing this war through this animation, just like the Panchatantra in Indian society. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhinav. Israel as the octopus. Wow, that's quite I must say. But it would also be interesting to, see that in their assessment, and especially, so David versus Goliath, I mean, Iran versus the US, Israel combined. I think another aphorism of your would be that man is primary, weapons are secondary, and the Iranians have shown that how the human factor becomes so critical. Okay, Noel, I think we'll have you, and I don't see us having much more time beyond that. Please go ahead. Yes, Noel? Unmute yourself. Oh, he can't unmute himself. Please.
Okay, perfect. This is good. So, Shruti and Raj, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I had a very quick question. So, the Hormuz Strait and Iran, to some extent, is quite important besides just oil. It's also an important source of helium for China, which is essential for semiconductors. It's also a source for the raw ingredients to produce fertilizer, pesticides, and other allied petrochemicals. So I'm wondering whether, from your research, were you able to see some kind of rethinking within the Chinese government on how to effectively de-risk from the whole Hormuz issue?
So we take, I mean, I think we'll be making the final comments in the time left.
Yes.
So I'll just quickly address the excellent comments by Mr. Abhinav Kumar. So I agree. In fact, the first point is very, very important, because both across media and across official statements, there are different words that are used to refer to the particular Iran war, that what we have called Iran war. They call it the regional situation. They call it US-Israel attacks on Iran. It has also been called Iran war. So there are multiple ways, and it would be, again, a very interesting question to look at how it is being named. It is also called the Middle Eastern conflict. So there are multiple ways that it has been, this particular conflict has been referred to in Chinese media. The second thing about memes, yeah, this is again something we thought about, that how can this visual form of media, because there are amazing memes being generated by all sides. Iran has, if I can use the language, strong meme game, and same goes for Chinese social media, and it will be, again, for future, an interesting exercise to see what characters are used to represent what, and they have been providing good entertainment. And finally, to Noel's question, So in Chinese media, at least, we find that strategic reserves has been a big. So this is something that they started developing 10 years ago. And at least according to the media reports that these articles that we read, that they started doing this 10 years ago, and it has come to fruition now that they were so the 2012 article by Professor Wang Jisoo that we referred to also mentions that how we need to develop this strategic reserve capacity. So self-reliance is a big thing, almost contained industrial systems, and diversification. But I don't see how diversification would be relevant here, given China is the dominant supplier producer in many of the critical sectors. But yeah, they recognize that Strait of Hormuz is essential, and therefore, in official statements, there are repeated calls for both parties to put an end to the conflict, and that there should be a flow of goods and trade should happen as normal in waterways. So it's one of the points that they make in the 5-point mediation also. Um, yeah, I think that would be my response. Not a direct response, but that's what we know about the situation as of now.
Okay, Raj,
Raj.
before you conclude,
Yeah.
I'll ask
Yes.
Usha to come in.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry, I just raised my hand in the last minute because I couldn't resist actually, because for the past 2 days, I've been seeing a lot of news on, and I don't know if, I know that you had already published this paper, I think a few weeks ago, and I don't know if you've looked at the Japan angle, and what is people's reaction, because I've seen increasingly from the time that Japan has been put under pressure to join the war, and some delays in their military formations, which was actually on the line. So I don't know if you've looked at it, but maybe if you're expanding the paper, you can look at this, or you're continuing to look at this angle. And because I think I've also seen increasing negative comments. And suddenly villainizing Japan. In fact, the conference I had gone to China, suddenly the Japanese delegation did not get visa, and they had to cancel in the last minute. And this sudden antagonism against Japan increased in the past few weeks. And I think it has a lot of connection with with Japanese pressure from internal and external pressure to join the war, or and I have seen reports in Chinese media about how Japan has the capacity and the potential to go back to what it was during the Second World War. That is one. And another comment is that I don't know if you've also looked at, since Shruti started with this, with the fact that China has a very high stake, and so are these commentaries actually talking about the high stake on China, and whether they are taking it as an advantage because of the shift in the narrative, that how now America is no more the validated leader. So has it also turned into an advantage? Thank you. I'm sorry if they are too long questions.
I
Raj, maybe you can answer them.
the Japanese
Okay.
angle
Yeah.
is really quite fascinating because it will immediately have a domestic resonance. We've seen in the past anything to do with Japan, and particularly any whiff of militarism where Japan is concerned, that you will have this tremendous upsurge, and I don't think it needs to be orchestrated, this anti-Japanese kind of thing. So I think that's an interesting angle because we had seen these moves between the US and Japan. And so that's quite a useful point you brought in. So Raj, if you have some concluding
Yes,
comments.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the comments, and thank you, Abhinav and Noel, for your comments as well. Chronologically starting, so as Abhinav pointed out about the terminology using Iran war or US-Israel war on Iran or Middle East conflict. So we really discussed this a lot because exactly what to use. And in fact, we were also of the opinion that perhaps we should use West Asia instead of Middle East conflict. But because in the article we have in many places, directly quoted important statements from Chinese experts, and they use Chungtung, which is Middle East, for their uh, in their own writings. So to avoid any confusion or to not have two different framings, we decided to stick with Middle East and the Iran war. And so yeah, and on yeah, so on ma'am's comments about the Japan angle, ma'am, in the commentaries and the articles that we analyzed, Japan did come up a few times, but mm, only as a portrayal of a cautionary tale for China, in the sense that it should not be allowed, that Japan should not be allowed to become an Israel of of Asia. That is basically a strong proxy of the US, which acts on behalf of the US. So, which in many cases, I mean, yeah, so that is what the experts were the opinion of, and we did see many negative comments on the social media's comment section on posts that talk about Japan's position in the war, or Japan's support for the US. And as expected, the Chinese audiences, they had a negative attitude towards Japan in those comments. But yes, I mean, we can definitely delve deeper into the Japan angle, and for maybe for further developing this work. And so we will definitely look into that, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So I think we have reached pretty much on target the end of our seminar. And it only remains for me to now thank you both. This has been really quite interesting. A lot of fresh material has been put out before us. What I particularly appreciate from both of you is this foray into the internal dynamics, into the internal thinking, into the debates that are going on within China, and not just those which we are used to. You know, there are, say, half a dozen now very well-known Chinese scholars who dominate the discourse as far as Chinese writings are concerned. But the nuances which help you understand that maybe this is not a monolith that we are looking at, that there are these different pulses, there are these different rhythms. Possibly they are part of that same larger kind of frame, but they are nonetheless distinct, and to that extent offer scope for investigation and maybe even engaging with those. So thank you both very much. I do hope you carry this to the next stage. I think you need to get more voices into this frame. You need to have a better sense of the geographical range and some of the other issues that were raised here, particularly the Japanese angle, which I think has a very special domestic resonance compared to any other. And I think also, just in part, in conclusion, I would say that maybe a lot of responses were kicked off with regard to Taiwan. You mentioned it briefly, but I think that this US-Israel war, aggression on Iran, has actually got them thinking about what is possible as far as Taiwan is concerned. So they are linked in one sense, and it would be interesting to see in what manner are popular perceptions looking at this linkage. So with that, let me thank you all once again, and to the audience, great questions, and we look forward to having you with us at the next Wednesday seminar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Now, wait a bit. I need to hand it over to Veda.
Oh, sorry.
To do the final. Thank you, Veda, for please wrap it up for us.
Thank you, Chair. With this, we come to the end of today's seminar. We thank Mr. Raj Gupta, Ms. Shruti Jargad, and Professor Alka Acharya for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their valuable time. We also thank the audience for joining us today. The video of today's seminar shall be available on the ICS YouTube channel. We would like to invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminars. Further information regarding the event can be found on the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.